Hey there, and welcome to Into the Terminal. Today we are going to be talking about tips and tricks for the Gnome Shell. And here today to help me with that is Mr. Brian Smith.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. I am on a RHEL 9 system here with Gnome installed, and I'm here on the login screen. This is where we're going to start. So when you are on the login screen, you'll see a list of user accounts that the system has detected. You can click on an account to log in, or you can click not listed if there's an account you want to use that's not detected there. So if I click on my username, the other little thing I'll point out here is there's this little gear down here in the corner. You can click on that. And this allows you to specify a different display server. If you want to use, for example, the X11 display server, you could select that. I'm going to stick with Wayland and go ahead and log in by typing in my user password.
And I think it's worth mentioning that with the switch from from RHEL 8 to RHEL 9, Wayland is now enabled by default as opposed to X11, which X11 is now deprecated in RHEL 9.
Right. Yep. Good point. Good point. So cool. All right. So we're logged in. This is the RHEL 9 default GNOME desktop you'll see when you log in. I'm just going to walk through some of the high-level overview items you'll see here, and then later on we'll get into some, kind of more advanced tips and tricks that you can use. But when you log in, you're going to see this top bar along here, and this has three main elements. So you have the Activities button over here in the upper left. We'll come back to that later. In the upper middle, you have the date and time. If you click on that, it'll show a calendar and then show any notifications for your account. And then over in the upper right, we have the system menu here where you can do things like change the volume, change the networking, lock the screen, log out, etc. So that's the top bar here. Now, if we go back to activities, if we click on activities, we're going to see several things kind of change when you click activities. Everything kind of zooms out. You can see our wallpaper is a little bit smaller. We have a search bar up here, and then we have the dash that pops up at the bottom. The dash is going to contain, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
And why don't you just open a couple of applications at random?
Yeah.
Because this really shows the power of the activities view.
Yeah, so I'll click on the terminal here and go back to activities, click on files. So yeah, that's as easy as that to open up applications from your dash. Yeah. And then one cool thing is, you can easily customize this. So, for example, say I don't want to have this help on here. I can just right click on it, remove from favorites. And then if I click on this show applications and see everything else, if I like to have the calculator on the dash, I can right click, add to favorites. I also like to have the text editor, add to favorites. You can see those are now listed there. So you can kind of customize this to whatever is important for you, that you're frequently using on your system.
So if you're like me and you have an ultra-wide monitor and 1,000 windows open, you can always default to the activities screen to get a high-level view of all the applications. So when that one Firefox window that you're looking for has disappeared under a pile of other windows, this is a good way to zoom out and see exactly what you're working with.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's just a real quick high-level overview, and we'll get into some more details here later on as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm supposed to do a thing. I'm producing and hosting today. So yeah, welcome to Into the Terminal. This is a chance for you to like and subscribe to this content if you want to see more. So after the break, we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks. We'll talk about some things that actually Brian did some amazing research and preparation for this episode, and we'll talk about extensions. We'll talk about customizations, ways you can tweak your desktop. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into the GNOME terminal. So stay with us after the break. Hey there, welcome into the terminal, episode 99. I cannot believe that it's been just shy of 2 years. Actually, Into the Terminal is having its birthday, I think, next week. So it'll be 2 years old, and we're getting ready to celebrate episode 100. So today we are talking about tips and tricks for GNOME Shell. But Brian, you aren't Scott or Nate. Where am I?
Yeah, we're the new people for Into the Terminal, right?
Hey, speak for yourself. I'm OG. Scott and I did that crazy 2 episodes a
Yeah.
day, daily episodes for 30 days, never again. It's so we're calling this the Bad Batch episode. So respond in the chat if you get the Star Wars reference. But actually, we're Brian and I host the flagship program for the RHEL YouTube channel called RHEL Presents, and we're live every other Wednesday. But Nate and Scott are off site today at a conference, and so they're enjoying the beautiful weather in California. And so Brian and I thought we'd sneak into the studio while they're out of town and take over for an episode. And I'd like to point out, I see Nate in the chat. We did the transition and the 5 minute critical path in 4 minutes and 55 seconds. So bring it up. All right. With that said, I will stop teasing our displaced hosts, and why don't we dive back in and see what's up next.
Yeah. So I want to start by talking a little about like how can you start applications really quickly and efficiently, because that's one of the most important things when you're working with a display manager is how do you launch your applications effectively. So when you're launching applications, you're going to do it from the activities menu usually. And I already mentioned, you can click on this button to bring up the activities menu, but there are other methods to bring this up. There's 3 methods that I'm familiar with to bring up activities. So you can click on it. That's method 1. If you push the super key on your keyboard, this is also known as the Windows key. So if you push that key on your keyboard, that's going to bring up the activities menu. And then the third way is if you just bring your mouse up to the upper left-hand corner here, it will start that activities menu. I'm on a virtual machine, so that's not working really well. But normally on a regular system, when you bring it up to the upper left-hand corner, it will just automatically bring up that activities menu.
I actually disable that. Anytime I go up there and don't need it, it's frustrating. But we'll actually talk about how to do that here in just a second.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Eric. Is you can customize almost everything with GNOME. Like it's really customizable, so you can change it to whatever your preferences are. But in any case, once you have the activities menu open, you can obviously you can click on an application down here like we talked about. But oftentimes you want to start an application without leaving the keyboard, right? You don't want to have to go over to your mouse if you're in the middle of typing something. So one method you can use to start an application is just push that super key on your keyboard, the Windows key. And then if you just start typing, it's going to go into that search bar. So if I start typing, I'll just type fire. You can see it's going to come up, and Firefox is the first thing selected. And I can just push enter. And so I've launched Firefox now without my hands ever leaving the keyboard. I didn't have to use the mouse at all. So that can be a really quick way to start applications. Another shortcut that I learned while I was researching this is, down here on your dash, if you assign each of these a number, Firefox being 1, Files 2, Software 3, etc. If you just push the super key plus that number, so if I push, hold down super and push 5, so let me go away. So I'm holding down super, push 5, it's going to launch the calculator because that's the fifth item here.
See, that's something I didn't know, which is why I got into podcasting in the first place. It gives me an excuse to learn new things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So,
I didn't know this either until earlier this week. So,
I was a Mac user long before I started using. I started with Arch and then been a long time Fedora user since. And on the Mac side, there is Command, which is kind of the Mac super key, and then the spacebar, which will bring up a similar search function. So when I started using GNOME full time, that activity search bar was a huge advantage, especially since I'm a quicker typist than I am using a mouse.
right.
It's so nice to hit that super key, type in. Usually within about 3, maybe 4 characters, you can get the application you want. But I mean, Firefox and the terminal are pretty much open all the time, and so being able to put those maybe first and second in that favorites bar really save you some time as you're trying to get up and running in the morning.
Definitely. And so one other thing I want to point out is you'll notice, right now I have a calculator and terminal open. You'll notice there's a little dot below those now in the dash. That just indicates that these are running. And so if I now go to the dock and left click on calculator, it's going to bring the calculator into focus. Likewise, if I click on terminal, bring that into focus. One other little tip here is if you want to start another terminal, right? You don't want to just go to this terminal. If you middle click on this terminal, it's going to launch another one. And this works with any of these. So if I want to bring up another calculator window, middle click, brings up another one. So just a little quick tip to open up multiple windows really quickly. Another thing you are going to frequently need to do is switch between applications. So let me bring up a couple more things here so we can demo this a little bit better. Okay, so I now have several windows open. If I need to switch between these windows, you can either hold down Alt and push Tab, or you can use the hold down Super and push Tab. And that's going to allow you to switch between your applications here. But what you'll notice is, I have multiple terminal windows open, and it's only showing one terminal here.
Mm-hmm.
If I go over to there, it'll show my multiple windows, and I can push down on the keyboard, and now I can select which of those terminals I'd like to switch to. Likewise, there's another little shortcut. So if you have multiple Firefox, multiple terminals, anything, the same application open multiple times, you can hold down the Super key and then press the back tick. And that's going to just allow you to just switch between whatever current window you have open. So this would work for Firefox or Terminal or anything else. So another little shortcut there. And then you mentioned the search, Eric. So let's go back to search, because there's actually quite a bit you can do with that search bar. So
what I really like, if you want to bring up the search bar, search doesn't just search your applications. In fact, now that I think of it, we should have put in a couple of sample text files. But if you start to type a string, it not only searches through your applications, but it'll also search within documents. So if you've got a big documents folder, or maybe you've got a remote file share that you use. So for instance, right now it's pre-release season for me. So I'm working on What's New Decks. I'm working on webinars for the next minor release of RHEL, which, by the way, about 2 months out, give or take a week or so, RHEL 9.4 and 8.10, free service request, or free PSA, public service announcement. And so, yeah, as Brian's demonstrating, he created a folder called My New Folder, and he typed that into the search box and found it. So if we put a What's New presentation inside My New Folder, or even text within that document, we can find it through the search function. And Brian, you said you like to have the calculator app, at least on your favorites bar, if not open at all times. Occasionally my brain will short out and I'll forget basic mathematics. So you never know when you might need to run just a basic mathematical process. So sometimes I'm trying to remember, okay, so our next episode is 3 weeks out. That's 21 days. So what is the date? 21 days from now, or quick division problem. You can just type that in. So 21 divided by 3. Okay, 7 days. So cool. And then probably one of the best things is if you're working with larger numbers and my memory is terrible, you can actually click underneath that arithmetic equation and copy the result to your keyboard, which is so helpful. You're working on math. You're trying to add. I don't know. I ran out of clever ideas for math, but hey, it's payday. So you're trying to do budgeting, and you want to make sure that you pay the right amount on your credit card. You can just do the math here, copy the results to the keyboard, paste that into your Firefox window, and boom, your credit card payments due. Not just because I need to do that after the show, but.
So one question for you, Eric. Are you the kind of person that likes to use emojis everywhere?
Not everywhere, but every now and then.
So you can actually use the search for characters as well. So if I start searching here, I'm going to search for cat smiling. Okay, you can see it's going to also search in the characters application. You can see these different emojis here. And if I click on one of these, like this one, it's going to put it in the clipboard. Then I can go ahead and paste it in. You know, search for upwards trend, get this emoji. So really quick way to find, you know, different emojis or different characters. This is not just emojis, like, you know, different characters that might not be on your keyboard. You want to access, search for them very, very quickly.
Okay, so just because of you, Brian, I'm now going to include emojis in everything because now I know how to do it.
At least whenever you message me, include a lot of emojis. So.
Right.
And then another kind of cool thing with the terminal, like I'm going to open up two terminals here. So again, I'm going to middle click to bring up another terminal. Let's go ahead and get rid of this text editor. I'm going to start on this one, a sleep 1000 command. On this one, a sleep 2000 command. So I now have these commands running. And if I search for 2000, you can see it's going to also show a result for my terminal because I have a command running with that, you know, in the command name. But one thing you'll notice is, you know, by default, you know, this character's result was higher priority than the terminal, right? Well, this is actually all customizable. So if we go to the settings here and then go down to search, you can see these are all the things on this system that are going to be searched when you go to that search bar, okay? And you can see terminal is lower than characters. So you can easily just reorder these. So I can say, you know, I want terminal to be up high here. And you can also turn things on and off. Like if you don't want that calculator to come up in the results in the search bar, you can turn that on or off. But anyways, now that I have terminal higher than characters, if I search for 2000, you can see that that's going to be a higher, you know, higher result. And I can just press enter now. And since it's the first item, it's going to jump right to that terminal that has that command running.
So, long-time GNOME user, over a decade, and I had no idea that you could reorder those until this week.
Just drag and drop there. So,
oh, goodness.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. But let's talk about workspaces as well, because that's another really big part of GNOME is the idea of workspaces. You can think of workspaces kind of like a virtual desktop, and these really, you know, allow you to separate your work. And I like to think of it like in the real world, you have different physical workspaces in your life. You know, if you're going to cook, you might go into your kitchen workspace. If you're going to go work on your car, you're going to go into your garage workspace, right? So the workspaces on GNOME are really similar. You know, you can divide up your work into these separate workspaces, and you can divide that up however you'd like, depending on, you know, what task you're working on, however you want to break things up. But it can be a really powerful way to kind of separate things so that you have tools and utilities on different workspaces that are appropriate for that task that you're working on.
I only have 5 workspaces right now on this machine.
So to work with workspaces, you know, like I said, when you go to activities, you notice it kind of zooms out. Like this is my wallpaper, it's kind of zoomed out, and now there's another wallpaper over here, right? So these are the workspaces. This is workspace 1. This is the second workspace. So if I click on the second workspace here, I'm now in this other workspace, and I can open up applications there. And you'll notice as well from the activities menu here, you can see a quick way to switch between these workspaces, right? And what's cool is you can drag and drop windows. So if I want to put this window on workspace 3, I can just drag it and then drop it there. And now it's on workspace 3. And you'll notice that it automatically created another workspace for me. And that's because GNOME's going to dynamically create and remove these as needed. And it will always have one extra one at the end here that's blank. So you always have a place to, you know, drag and drop your windows to if you want to, you know, use a new workspace. And then I'll just cover a couple of shortcuts if you're working with these. You know, from the keyboard, if you hold down Control Alt and then use the arrows, this is a shortcut to quickly switch between your workspaces. And another pretty cool shortcut is, you know, if you want to move a window, you know, I talked about you can drag and drop it using activities, but you can also, you know, have a window active, hold down Control, Alt, and Shift, and then press the arrows. And now whichever workspace I stop on, it's going to move that window to that workspace.
So helpful, especially if you spend a lot of your time doing context shifting.
Yep.
So like super nerdy fact is I'm on workspace number 4 right now because that's my live streaming workspace. I've got show notes, I've got the YouTube chat, I've got a basically a confidence monitor where I'm watching the stream. I've got our stream itself right here in the center, and being able to divide up my workspaces based on context. Like I've got one that's just for communications. So instant messaging, Slack, email, all that kind of stuff. So this workspaces, especially the dynamically scaled workspaces, are a great way to organize your work.
Exactly. Yeah, really
So then,
powerful tool.
for sure. And so Brian, you're a product manager, and I'm a technical marketer. And so one of the things we do so much is we want to capture data off the screen and put it into a blog post, or maybe attach it to, say, a Jira ticket for sharing with others. And that's where the screenshot tool comes into place. And this is something that I don't think about often, but I use all the time.
Me too.
I don't know about you, Brian, but I don't need people seeing that I've got 15 tabs open or 50 tabs open, depending on when the last time Firefox said it needed an update.
Yep.
But I don't typically take full size screenshot captures. So what I'll do is and even the window, like my Firefox example, I don't necessarily want to grab the full window. So one of my favorite pieces of the screenshot tool is the selection. So when you click selection and you click take a screenshot, it gives you this box where I can capture just the relevant materials. So I'll grab the command prompt, I'll grab the command and the command output, and probably what I use the most. You of course can save that screenshot to your pictures folder as a PNG. But what I probably use the most is if I'm taking a screenshot, I usually want to embed it somewhere in a blog post that I'm drafting. So I've got a Word document open, or LibreOffice, or Google Sheet, Google Docs. So that copy to clipboard is probably what I use the most, because now we can take that screenshot and embed it into a blog post or into a Jira ticket, and I don't have to save the file, go to my pictures folder, grab the screenshot, upload it to my doc. Instead, I can just copy it to the clipboard, paste it straight in, and I'm done.
Yep.
But of course, like all good screenshotting applications, we can grab the window, which will grab the title bar and the full window, or of course grab that full screenshot.
And another cool thing you can do with Gnome is that you can actually record the screen into a video as well. And so to do that, there's a shortcut you do, Control Alt Shift and then R. And you'll notice when I push that, this little red dot up in the upper right hand corner came up, indicating that it is now recording the screen. If I do a Control Alt Shift R again, it's going to turn that off. And if you go into Files and Videos, you'll now see that screencast is recorded. Now, one thing to keep in mind, by default, it's going to limit these recordings to 30 seconds. There is some settings you can go in and change to make that so there's not that 30-second limitation. Just Google that and you can find out the information how to do that. Pretty easy, but by default, it's going to stop after the 30 seconds. All right, cool. Let's cover a couple more quick tips and tricks before we run out of time here. So one thing I use all the time is the ability to resize windows to the left and right. So let me show an example of this. Let me bring up Firefox and a terminal. And we're going to have to get a second for Firefox to load here. Okay, there we go. Let me clean up some of this stuff, because I got a lot of windows open here. So let me just clean some of this up.
Yeah, and this is probably one of my favorite features inside of GNOME, is just the ability to resize windows and kind of organize them on my screen. You never know what size window you're going to get. Depends on what you're using last, and so for me, I'm very obsessive about none of my windows overlapping, not popping up on the screen in random places, but I'm very obsessive about and for so many of us, I'm sure the traditional is I have a blog post that I'm reading on the left, and I've got a terminal on the right where I'm trying to learn how to do something.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So, so in this Firefox, I have the RHEL documentation, and what if I want to, quickly have these side by side, my web browser and my terminal. I can hold down the super key and push left. That's going to resize Firefox to the left side. I can super tab to select my terminal, hold down super right, and that now resizes the terminal to the right. And what's really cool is the middle of these windows is kind of like glued together, right? So if I resize, just drag and drop in the middle, it's going to resize both of the windows at the same time, which is really cool. Now I showed how to do it with the keyboard. You can also if you just take a window and then drag it over to like the left, you can see it kind of goes blue there. You can let it go. You can do this with the same with the right, kind of drag it over here, let go. Does the same thing. And then you can also, another little shortcut, if you drag something to the top, it's going to maximize. If you drag it down, it's going to restore. And then of course, you can also use the super up key and super down key to do the same thing there. And then this is another thing I learned while I was researching this for this show. But one really cool thing from the terminal is, let's say we have, a lot of output here on the screen, and we want to use the scroll bar. So I think we all know if you left click on the scroll bar, it's going to jump to that exact location where you left clicked, right? But say there's all this information. Say I want to like kind of scroll through this and see each page. If I middle click on the scroll, it's going to go up one page at a time in that direction, not just jump to that location. So I can quickly just middle click and page up through this output and see what the output was. So pretty cool.
So if you want to learn more about some of the things that we're sharing today, check the show notes. I think we've got a couple of links, but also go out to the GNOME website, as well as the Fedora magazine. There are a ton of articles on using and tweaking GNOME. So we were going to talk a little bit about Flatpaks, but we're kind of running short on time. So why don't we just stick with the GNOME shell today? Maybe we'll take over another day and show how to add additional packages and whatnot. But one of the things I love about GNOME is it's built to be highly customizable. Out of the box, it's pretty basic. It's pretty tight as far as what you can change. But we can actually install a package called GNOME Tweaks. So I wasn't just being facetious when I said you can tweak your GNOME shell, but if you do a DNF install on specific packages, it'll actually give you an applet that you can tweak the GNOME shell. And there's a couple of things, having been a Windows user and then a Mac user, and then coming to GNOME, that I like, just from the perspective of gotta click continue there. Just from the perspective of having a comfortable look and feel. And so that's, for instance, if you go down to the top bar, nope, I was wrong. Title bars. There we go. Title bars. The first thing that I always enable is putting the maximize and minimize buttons up in the title bar there. That allows me to, if I'm doing Windows heavy, if I'm doing UI heavy work, that I'm on the mouse and don't want to move over to use keyboard shortcuts, I've got that minimize maximize button, which probably you use the keyboard more often than not, but it makes me feel happy that's there. So what about you, Brian? Any tweaks that you use?
Yeah, so I turn this on as well, and then we also have, if you search for GNOME Shell extensions, if I do DNF search GNOME Shell extension, RHEL includes several. Let me just do that again so it's a little cleaner output. RHEL includes several GNOME Shell extensions, that are packaged with RHEL. And then in addition to this, there's, I think, probably hundreds on the GNOME website that you can install that allow you to customize all kinds of different things in your environment. So personally, I like to have, I use this GNOME Shell extension window list, which brings up a little menu down on the bottom that shows you your open windows. But I think, like you were saying originally, the point is, you can really customize this using, all these different extensions. There's really extensions for almost everything.
Yeah, for instance, probably one of my favorite extensions is called Clipboard History, which gives you a little clipboard up in the on your screen's title bar that keeps track of your clipboard history. So if if I'm applying new configurations and I've got a couple of different commands that I'm running in different sequences, trying to make make a config change, run a command to test it. It'll save up to, I think, around 15 or so of your recent. It'll save about 15 of your recent clipboard entries. Or like if I'm using Bitwarden on a site that doesn't like the autofill feature, what I can do is I can copy my username and my password into my clipboard history, put in my username, and then switch to history there and input my password as well, which of course Bitwarden is another great tool to install, but we'll talk about that a different day.
Yeah, so just while you were talking there, I went and installed that that window list extension and also the extensions application. So you can go in here and I can turn on this window list extension. Now you can see down at the bottom, I have this little toolbar that shows all the windows open. I can click on these to minimize and maximize them. It also shows me my workspaces over here. So this is one I personally use, but there's so many options, and there's probably so many that I've never even seen that might be useful.
All right, so we had so much more we were going to talk about, but 30 minutes is not a lot of time some days. So the chat's been pretty quiet, but I think this is helpful for a lot of reasons, and I think we should have a follow-up episode to this where we talk a little bit about extensions, additional tools, maybe some tweaks that folks use. Maybe we'll put a poll out on the RHEL YouTube channel. But yeah, that's just a quick look at Gnome Shell, and like that last example that you used, Brian. What I really love about Gnome Shell is, especially around Gnome 40 or so, they really committed to minimizing the amount of features and functionality in the shell itself. What that did was it gave you a very, very lean, very, very minimal experience, which personally I think GNOME is a very attractive looking desktop environment. But what it does is for like what Brian was showing was a virtual machine on his desktop. Or like I've got a RHEL 9 system that serves as my Bastion host, or you might have heard it called a jump box, so that if I'm out at a conference, I can use Tailscale to kind of tunnel back into my network, and I've got a RHEL 9 machine that sits right on the edge there, and that's where I connect into. So it gives me a very minimal workspace. But if we're talking about like my Fedora workstation here that's also running GNOME, I can add all the extensions, all the features, and like Brian, your window list extension used to be part of the default GNOME Shell install, but I think it was GNOME 40 that was pulled out of the default shell and was repurposed or repackaged as an extension. So people like Brian who still want that have it and can install it and enable it. And we didn't call this out specifically, but you showed how a lot of you see a lot of how a lot of these extensions are actually RPM packages. So what that means is if you're using Ansible to configure your systems or some kind of Kickstart environment, you can actually start to build out kind of a golden workspace image. So if you're deploying RHEL Workstation at scale for your business, you can install a lot of those things right out of the box and really customize your system. I knew a guy that could build out his entire laptop from a coffee shop using things like Kickstart and Ansible playbooks and config files to basically redeploy his entire workspace with one Ansible playbook.
That's awesome. Yep.
Oh, it was so cool, and I've tried so many times to do that, but I end up losing losing focus on that project because there's something newer and shinier to do. All right, well, that brings us to the end of episode 99. This was our Bad Batch RHEL Presents takeover episode. So, Brian, thank you so much for short notice jumping in. And I got to hand it to you. You did pretty much all the legwork on this. I had some time middle of the week to work on this, and by the time I'd looked at the episode guide, you already had things, 5 or 6 of the tips we shared that I didn't know. So so I learned a lot, and it might change a little bit of how I use GNOME. So really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. And so next week, episode 100. So I'm going to be a gracious host and let Scott and Nate take their show back over. But I'm going to join in. We're going to be talking about our favorite segments. So our favorite bits of topics that we've covered, our favorite features. We haven't quite fleshed it out yet, but should be an exciting episode to celebrate episode 100. So big mile marker for this show. Brian, you and I need to do some catch up. RHEL Presents is like 3 times as old, and but we do have a really exciting episode next week. So join us for RHEL Presents next Wednesday. We're going to be doing an introduction to Stratus. So we've got a product manager from the RHEL team, as well as a pre-sales engineer, a solutions architect here from Red Hat. We're going to be talking about what Stratus is, how easy it is to deploy it, and why you need to start using it right now. So with that said, thank you all for joining us. Really enjoyed the engagement in the chat. So on behalf of the RHEL team, on behalf of Scott and Nate, and on behalf of my co-host, Brian Smith, I've been Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and we look forward to seeing you next week for RHEL Presents and Into the Terminal. Until then, as Scott would say, happy Into the Terminal.